Hi there, I'm Dave Horton. I'm the creator of jambonz, the open source CPaaS for service providers. And in this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to build jambonz applications using the Node.js SDK. If you haven't already, go create your free account at jambonz.org so you can follow along with me and build the examples yourself as we go along. And if you're totally new to jambonz, you may want to watch my video on getting started with jambonz first. It's a good intro to the topics we'll be covering here. Okay, let's get started. I hope you love building applications with Node.js as much as I do. It really changed my life as a developer when it came out in 2009. As a mainstream functional programming language with the power to run server applications, I just found I was having so much fun in building applications with it. And I instantly saw the potential to bring it over to the voice over IP world, and that was the motivation behind my creating Dractio, which is the open source SIP application server. It also happens to be the technology that underlies jambonz. Well, I still love building Node.js applications today, and while there are many ways to build jambonz applications, because after all, it's just webhooks and REST APIs, I recommend people to try the Node.js SDK because it's so easy to get started with. And one of the things that we've done to make it easy is to have a create jambonz app command that you can run right out of npx. Similar to the create React app for those of you that are web developers and might have used React. And this little utility scaffolds out a basic application using Express as an HTTP server, and it sets everything up for you, including generating some simple sample apps. And that's where we'll get started. All right, let's move over to our laptops and start building. Okay, so as we mentioned, we're going to use npx and the create jambonz app to get us a quick start here. npx is the npm package runner. It's as simple as saying npx create jambonz app. Actually, let's run it with the -h for help flag the first time through so we can just see what our options are. Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's basically going to scaffold us a webhook application in Node.js using Express as the HTTP server. It'll create a few sample webhooks for us, and if we want, we can specify some scenarios for it to build out for us. But we're just going to take the defaults. Let's just go ahead and run it with we need to at least specify the folder we want to create our project in. So I'm just going to say create starter app. It will create a little starter app for us with a basic webhook, and we'll have a look at it, see what's going on, and then we'll build some more. All right, let's go into our starter app. And let's just have a look at what it's created for us. I think it's just a little bigger for you. Okay, so we've got a basic application here. And as mentioned, we're using Express. So it's an Express HTTP server at the core of it, responding to webhook requests. It's driven by environment variables, and we're going to see how to specify some of them in a bit. But you can see here it's asserting that you've provided your account SID, an API key, and base URL to the platform. With that, everything comes up. Now, as we look at the app.js file here, because I want you to understand it, what's going on, but this isn't something you're going to need to change. This is pretty much boilerplate stuff that will probably be good for you. Our changes will be when we implement individual webhooks, and we'll look at that in a second. Okay, we're creating an Express app, and then we are including the jambonz Node SDK. And specifically, we're getting out of that a webhook response object that we'll be able to use. There's an option where we can use basic auth to protect our endpoint if we want. If we provide some environment variables for that. We're using Pinot as a logger, and we're just coming up and running. For those of you familiar with Express, you know it has the concept of middleware. So here you see us using some middleware, putting some middleware in place if we want to use basic auth. We're going to be dealing with JSON payloads, so we're using some standard Express middleware for that. Now let's talk a little bit about webhook secret. Every request that you get from jambonz has a jambonz signature header, which provides a signature generated by us for your account specifically of the request. So every request you get is signed, to put it simply. And it's a good idea to verify that signature. You wouldn't want someone to learn of your public endpoint, be able to send you a request and get back your application and any sort of private information or credentials that are in there. This is how you prevent that. We'll see a little more detail on that in a second. And then we've got standard Express kind of routing set up. Okay, boilerplate stuff, not much going on there. If we look at the routes, which is where things get a little more interesting, we've got a folder called endpoints, and we're listening for a health check on /health. Other than that, we are listening for, to start with, a couple of paths. So call status, we'll be able to receive call status events. We're not going to do anything with them in this app other than log them out, but stuff that you may want to write to a database or keep track of your own sort of call detail records. We've got a hello world application. It's actually the same hello world application that's out on the public apps URL for people to use, but we'll have a chance to look at it now. And we've got a dial time application. So it's created this simple webhook application. It's created two applications for us. Let's have a look at the hello world application. Now, if you're familiar with Express, or if you're familiar with pretty much any HTTP middleware, this is going to look pretty familiar to you. We're handling a post. We've already mapped it to a path one level above back here. So this would be a post to hello/hello-world. We've got the HTTP request and response, and we're going to examine the request and eventually return a response. You can see it's pretty simple. We're going to create an object, a new webhook response object called an app, and then we're going to call methods on that. So in this case, we're going to pause for 1.5 seconds, and then we're going to say some text. The text is just up here. In this case, I'm using SSML text, but you can put plain text in there as well, of course. And then we simply send back a 200 OK with a JSON version of this app. Now, these verbs that we're applying, app.pause, app.say, these you can all read about. They map exactly to the documentation, to the web. If you go to the webhook documentation on jambonz.org, and these are the verbs that you can use. So say, pause. We were going to do a pause with a length property, 1.5 seconds. We are going to do a say with a text property. We've got optional properties here. In our case, we're not supplying them, but we can be very specific for this command only about the speech synthesis we want to use. So if we had an application default that said we're using AWS, but for this particular command we wanted to use Google, or for this particular command we wanted to use a different language, we can override our application default. So all of the commands that you can use in the when your webhook response map one-to-one to the documentation on the website. So hopefully that's fairly straightforward. So here we're going to pause for a second and a half again. We're going to say some text. We're not specifying anything about these synthesizer, so we're going to use whatever we set up as the application default. We're going to return it, and that's it. So that's as simple as it gets for building a webhook. If we look at the call status, because we will get call status events, we're going to get in the body a payload, and we're just going to log it out. We'll see what kind of information we get on call status. Okay, that's the basic anatomy of an application. When we want to add new behaviors, new webhooks, we're just going to come in here and add new endpoints, and we're going to do stuff like we've done here. But to start with, let us configure and run this thing just to verify it's working. Before we do that, let's go back and talk about some of these environment variables that need to be set up. Some of these required environment variables. Your account SID, your API SID, your base URL. Well, in the project generated is ecosystem.config.js. I like to use PM2 as a Node package manager. You don't have to, but this scaffolded application does. If you wanted to see details on that, you can go to pm2.io. It's just a good place to put information like your environment variables and various kind of control things. And you can see that there's a space here for all that information. Nothing's filled in yet. By default, I'm going to listen on port 3000, and I can change that. So let's get this thing ready to test and run. Let me go back to my account here on jambonz.us. Let's copy in some of this information. So I need the account SID. Copy that. Copy an API key. Paste URL will be HTTPS. Again, I recommend you always to put this webhook secret in here, so by doing that, you're validating the signature that it came from us. I'm not going to use basic auth on mine, so I'll just remove those. Okay, this thing is ready to run. Now, if I start it up at this point, I can see it's listening on port 3000. Of course, it's listening on localhost on my little laptop. Jambonz isn't going to be able to reach that. So I either need to put it out on a public web server or use ngrok or a service like that, which is really quite neat. So I'm just going to use ngrok, and it will tunnel a connection for me. Let's make sure I'm getting this, and give me some public URLs. So now I've got something that's reachable, and let's go over and set it up here. Let's create an application. It's going to be hello world. It's going to be that URL. And my call status webhook. I'm going to stick with English. And I'll change WaveNet. So now I've got an application. Of course, to run it, I need to route incoming calls to it. I'm just going to take my Voxbone trunk and send all calls to it. Okay, now I'm good to go. Here, let me change to a debug level so that we can get that logging and see a little bit more of what's happening.
Hi there, and welcome to Jambonz. Jambonz is the CPaaS designed with the needs of communication service providers in mind.
Okay, so let's just have a look at some of the information that comes up. This is the first post, which is going to tell us, is requesting us to return the document for the application. Let me just take that and show you some of the details. Let's bring this into and properly format it a little bit for you and have a look at it here. So here's the payload that we're getting. The first thing I want to point out is you're getting all of the SIP headers. You're getting complete detail. Now, you may not need it in a lot of cases, but as a service provider, it's nice to have. And many other CPaaSs don't provide that detailed level of information. They kind of normalize everything to, well, here's the calling number and here's the called number, and they don't give you much else. Here we're getting a lot of extra stuff. So if the carrier has additional headers they're providing. You have access to all of that. And then you get a bunch of sort of this normalized information. We get the call direction, it's inbound. We've got some call identifiers, application identifiers, the calling party number, the status, the trunk or carrier that it came in from, the actual IP that it came in from, and the current status of the call, which is a 100. We've issued a 100 trying back. We haven't done anything else with it, so we don't automatically answer the call. It's under your control as the application provider. Okay, so that's the information that comes in. We then, by virtue of writing this application, sent back a payload, and we executed that. Okay, that's fine. Very simple application. Now let's build an application. Let's do something a little more complicated, the next step. Let's say we want to build an application that's going to gather some information from the caller and then do something. Let's make it an application that prompts for a phone number and then dials that phone number. It's kind of a two-stage calling application. So the call is going to come in. We're going to say, please enter a phone number, something like that. We're going to wait and collect a phone number. Let's let the user either speak the phone number or enter it via DTMF. And if it's a 10-digit North American number, then let's try to outdial it. So that'll be the application that we'll build right now. Okay, let's get started by creating a new endpoint. And I'm just going to call this whole application Dialorama to make it simple. Dialorama. .js. I go up here and just say, I'm going to add a new route. Okay. Now what we're going to do is start with the same basic information that we saw in the other application. So what we see here is we're going to, if it comes, we're looking for a URL, which is /dialorama /collect, because this is the first part of the application. We're collecting something. Going to create a webhook response. This time we're going to use the gather command. Again, we can go look at our documentation for the gather command, and we can see we've got a lot of options here. We're not using all of them. We've got an action hook. When we collect either the speech or the digits, that's a URL we'll call to send them back to the user. We've got various kind of options here. We can embed a say command in it as a prompt. So we already saw the say command on its own. It can also be embedded in a gather. We can specify details of the recognizer to use. Again, we did specify a default at our application level, so this would only override if we wanted to override. So all the information about the gather is there. Let's have a look at how we've done it. We're specifying an action hook. Notice we're using a relative URL. We'll come back to our same base URL. That would be pretty much the standard way to do it. For input, we're going to say we want digits or speech. If they do enter digits, we'll want to finish on a £. We'll be collecting 10 digits. We're looking for 10 digits. We'll have a timeout of 20. We've got a say command embedded, and it's going to prompt us to enter a 10-digit phone number. Again, we're taking some application defaults. So we didn't say anything about the recognizer in terms of language or whether we're using Google or AWS as the recognizer. So we'll go whatever is set up at our application level. Same thing with text-to-speech. We'll go with our defaults at the application level. So this is pretty straightforward. This is only the first part of the application. This will be playing us a prompt, collecting something, and then returning some data to us in /process. So we're not going to completely implement the second part yet, but let's implement enough to log what comes back. Oops, we already are logging the payload there, so we don't need to do that right now. Let's simply do that. Right now we'll just say response.send status 200. So we're actually not sending anything back. We're just sending a 200 OK back. But we will log what we get. And let's go over here and add a new application. Dialorama, using this. Okay, so again, the path is dialorama/collect for that first part of the application. Call status the same. And we'll use Google as the recognizer, English as the language. All right, let's now route our incoming call on our Voxbone trunk to Dialorama. And we should be good to test.
Please say or enter the 10-digit phone number you would like to dial.
508-308-4809. Okay, let's have a look at what we got back. You can see we got back the action hook that we supplied, dialorama/process, and we've got a payload in here. Let's have a look at that in JSON lint to make it a little easier. Let's see. So you can see in the case of speech, we're going to get a speech object telling us it's the final transcript, and we'll get alternatives, of which typically we'll want the first one with a confidence level, and then the actual transcript. So you can see here it's given me the telephone number that I sent back, and Google's actually putting it into what it thinks is a telephone number kind of form. Now I want to outdial it without those dashes, so we'll need to strip those, but we've got the phone number that we want to outdial. So let's go back and now implement the second part of our little application right here. We'll make some space for that. So here's the first part of our implementation. We're going to look to see if we've got a speech as part of the payload, and if we do, we'll look at that. And if it's greater than 80% confidence, we're going to use it, and it's a 10-digit number. But we're going to need to strip the dashes out. So that's just a simple line of code here to do that. Gives us the number, and we'll assign that to destination. If on the other hand we got DTMF, we would have seen a digits property in the payload with the DTMF that was entered. So we'll take either speech or DTMF, and if we have a destination, either way through speech, then we want to outdial it. And that, as you can imagine, is going to be another webhook response. And it's going to be pretty simple. It's going to look like that. So if we have a destination, then we're going to return a payload. So we're getting an action hook. Our initial application, if you recall, said just do this gather. It didn't have any verb or command after the gather. Now, in response to this action hook, when the gather operation has been completed or fulfilled, if you like, we're going to say, here's a new application to execute, and we're going to return it. Now, if it's not a 10-digit number, then we're not returning anything, and the application will end. What we may typically want to do in a real application is either return something in the case where nothing was detected, or in our initial application after the gather, have it go on to I did not hear a response or something like that. Kind of up to you. We're going to keep it simple for our example. So let's save this. So you can see webhook response pretty straightforward. We're going to say please hold, we connect the call, and then we're going to do a dial. The target's going to be phone. The type is phone. That means means that we're providing a telephone number. Choose a carrier to complete that call to. We're going to prepend 1 since we want, this is for North American dialing, and we prompted for just the 10 digits. Okay. Let's restart our application with these changes. And let's go ahead and make that test. I'm going to dial out to that same talking time clock that I use in some of my examples, just because I know it will always answer. Here we go.
Please say or enter the 10-digit phone number you would like to dial.
613-745-1576.
Please hold while we connect your call.
You kind of see that we did get the transcript there, and we're out dialing that number.
NRC, Eastern Daylight Time, 13 hours, 4 minutes, and 40 seconds.
Okay. As I say, not too exciting, but we've built our first app. Simple kind of collect and play, gather something, and then out dial. Right. Now, let's move on to something else. Let's build another app. One of the applications that people like to build using Jambonz and some of my other open source is integration with Dialogflow. So we're going to take a look at that next. Let's start by taking a look at the Dialogflow documentation. So we can see we've got a lot of options here. A few things are required. In Dialogflow, there will be a Dialogflow project identifier that we'll need to reference. There'll be a language that we want to use for speech recognition. And we're going to have to provide some credentials in the form, again, of a service key in JSON that you can generate when you create a Dialogflow application. This, by the way, is a good reason why I suggested at the outset of always verifying the Jambonz signature when you receive a webhook request. So you're making sure that it came from us. It's not someone else who's snooping for your credentials. We've got the option to provide a welcome event. Some Dialogflow bots have a welcome event, and a whole bunch of other options here. Now, over in Dialogflow, I've created, or actually I haven't, my friend Chad Hart some time ago created a little sample bot that we can use for testing. We go to the home page for it. Here's where we can see the Dialogflow project ID that I referenced before. So that's one of the things we'll need to specify. And if I click on it, or you were to click on it, it takes you into Google Console, where you can generate that service key that we also need to specify. A couple things that are important when setting up your Dialogflow bot to be used is to enable beta APIs and features, first of all. And over on the speech tab, you can enable text-to-speech, and it will generate the audio files for us to play. And we'll see that you'll have an option of overriding that and doing text-to-speech on the Jambonz side as well, which actually can give you a little bit more flexibility in some cases. And you set up when you do that, you set up your voice configuration. Now this is a bot with a few different intents. It's about concerns a report that Chad and his colleague Sahi wrote some time ago, and you can ask questions about the report, and that's what we'll be doing. But let's go ahead and set it up now in our application. Let's write an application to exercise Dialogflow. Go back to our editor. Let's create a new endpoint. For this Dialogflow app. And we want to route to it. All right, so to start with, let's just put in some basic stuff. Again, some of this is kind of boilerplate. We're looking for a post. We're going to create a new webhook response. We're going to use the Dialogflow verb as we see. Haven't decided what to put in yet, and we're going to be returning that. Now, Dialogflow can return events as things go. Right here, there's an action hook that's invoked at the very end when the entire interaction is over. But what's often more interesting are events that we can get from Dialogflow during the conversation. Those events can be intents that Dialogflow has detected with a whole bunch of information related to that. It can be transcripts of speech. So Dialogflow will report to us on the transcripts that it's making as it's engaged in the dialogue with the caller. It can be events like the fact that we started to play some audio to the caller. So those events can be quite useful. So we're going to hook into those events. And one of the things we'll do that down here. We'll receive these events down here, and we'll take a look at them to see the kind of thing that we get. So let's put in some of the basic choices that we'll go with for our Dialogflow application. So I've specified that project ID. Again, you saw where I got that out of Dialogflow. Specified the language. Credentials I don't have yet. We need those JSON credentials. I'll show you in a sec how we'll get them. This Dialogflow does have a welcome intent, so we'll do that. We've got an option that if the user enters DTMF to pass that as a text input to Dialogflow. And there's one intent in this bot where Chad collects a promotional code, and it can either be spoken or entered via DTMF, so we'll do that. And then we've got our event hook. This is telling jambonz to report to us on all of the events that Dialogflow is generating as the dialogue is proceeding. Those will be quite interesting. Finally, we're saying barge-in is true. That refers to speech barge-in. Without speech barge-in set, there'd be a noticeable delay if you tried to talk through a Dialogflow prompt. It would take a second or two before it recognized you. With barge-in true, it's a little bit snappier. Down here, we'll leave this as just boilerplate for right now, where we'll log out the events so we can see what's going on. But we need to address the credentials in order to make this thing work. I've put the credentials, I've downloaded the JSON key and put it in a folder called credentials. So I'm just going to read out of that folder. I'm going to have an environment variable that has the path. I'm going to read the contents of the file into a string, and I'm going to just provide that as the credentials. That'll all work as long as I have the Dialogflow credential path environment variable set. And if I go over and look in my ecosystem, I did put it there. It's in a relative path off the project folder. Okay. So now we're ready to test this application, see if we can get responses from Dialogflow, and also see what kind of events that it gives us. To do that, let's go create an application on the jambonz side. Oops, I already created it, so we can just have a look at it. So, again, I've just got my basic URL to that. I've got some speech synthesis set up here, although again, to start with, we're using Dialogflow, so Dialogflow will be giving us the voice, the audio files to play, so it'll be interesting to listen to that. And I think I've already set it up to my Voxbone app to route to Dialogflow. I have, so we're actually good to go. I'm going to restart my application so that new environment variable is taking effect. And let's make a call in and just see what we've got here.
Hello, you can ask me about the KGRAI in RTC report. Ask questions such as how much does it cost?
How long is the report?
The complete report is 147 pages long.
Who wrote the report?
Sahi Levitt Levi and Chad Hart. Ask
Chad or Sahi for more information.
Who is Chad Hart?
Chad Hart is an independent consultant and blogger at webrtchacks.com and coaches.ai.
How much does the report cost?
The report is regularly priced at only $1,500.
Okay, so everything's working. We're connecting to our Dialogflow bot, and we're getting information back. Let us have a look at some of the information that we're getting back in the events. You can see it's pretty voluminous. Let me copy and paste this into a form that we can examine a little bit more closely. If we go over here. So you can see we're getting intents back. We're also getting transcriptions, but an intent will have a bunch of information. As you can see, we'll have the query result with the query text that matched, fulfillment text, all sorts of information that could be useful. One of the things that I want to show you how to do is to do a call transfer. But before we get to that, let's make a minor change to our application. Instead of using text as the audio files provided by Dialogflow, let's do our own text-to-speech. So we're just going to add a text-to-speech here. And we're going to say for vendor, where we can specify our vendor, Google or AWS, or just say default for the application default, which is what I'll do. And let's see, for language, we'll do default as well. Okay, let's restart. Now you're going to see when we run it this time, we're going to get a slightly different voice because we're using the Google WaveNet C voice. I'm also going to ask about doing a call transfer. This, if we look at the bot again, it's got a intent, which is, do you want to talk to Chad? And that intent has a follow-up intent. It confirms. And it's configured to use the Dialogflow phone gateway to transfer a call. This is not Chad's number. It's actually just a local Boston City Hall number that I'll use for test purposes. This information will come back to us. It won't be transferred by the Dialogflow gateway. Jambonz will be acting as the gateway to do the call transfer. But we'll see how that comes back to us in the intent and how we respond to it in that event hook in order to make it happen. Okay, let's call in again.
Good day. What questions do you have on the AI and RTC report?
I'd like to speak to Chad.
Okay, you want me to call Chad?
Yes. Okay. Now it didn't call Chad because we haven't put that in there yet, but let's just see what information we're getting back in the intent that's going to tell us call transfers requested. If I look at the last event, again, the payload type, the event is intent, and then there's a bunch of data. There's a query result, there's fulfillment messages. Now here we go. We can see we've got a fulfillment message with a platform of telephony transfer call, and a phone number. So that will be our key to know that it's time to do a call transfer. As we get these intents back, we'll look at them and see if it has this fulfillment message with a platform type of telephony. So let's see, when we make that change, it's going to be something like this. We're going to change that to this. Now again, this is in the event hook. We're going to look to see if the event type is intent. We're going to get the query result. Going to look in the query result to see if there were fulfillment messages. And if there were, and the platform type was telephony, then we're going to return a new application. So out of this event hook, we can return a new application. That'll shut down the connection to Dialogflow and send us off in a completely new direction. In that new application, we'll say a please hold message. And then we'll do a dial with the phone number that we got back in the payload. Now let's save that and let's try that.
Good day. What questions do you have on the AI and RTC report? Ask me things like, what is the methodology?
I'd like to speak to Chad.
Okay, you want me to call Chad?
Yes.
Please hold while we connect you to Chad.
Thank you for calling Boston 311. The city's 20.
Okay, there we go. Call transfer. So that's how call transfer is done. Okay, that's dialog flow sorted. All right. Well, we're having so much fun. Let's do one more before we quit. We've done dialog flow. Let's build an application that integrates with Amazon Lex. Amazon Lex team came out with their V2 streaming API earlier this year, and you can build applications in jambonz that connect to that. So if we go to the documentation, we can see we've got a lot of options here. Most of them are optional. Let's walk through some of them. So we need to specify something called a bot ID and a bot alias. Some credentials, that'll be our AWS credentials that'll give us the ability to do that. An AWS region. Then we have some optional information. We have an event hook like we did before, where we'll get events from the Dialogflow bot. We have an intent that's sort of the equivalent to the welcome intent that we had on Google. We can pre-configure an intent if we want. Let's switch over to the Lex console. I've got a very simple book trip bot. It's actually one of their template ones. And if I look at it, you can see it's got an ID here. That ID is what was referred to as the bot ID, so we'll need that. And then there's the concept of aliases, so you can have various instances of the bot. One here, I've got one for production and one for testing. If I go to my production bot, I can see I've got a different ID here that refers to the alias. So that's the bot alias. So those two things, the bot ID and the bot alias, uniquely identify a bot. I got languages that I've built for a specific alias, in this case English and French. And we're pretty much good to go on the AWS side. So let's get into our code editor and build an app. Now the first thing we're going to do, of course, is, as usual, create a new endpoint, lex.js. I won't go through the details of building it this time because you've seen pretty much everything, but let's have a quick look at what we've got here. We've got a new endpoint responding to a post, webhook response, and then we're using the Lex verb. We're providing the bot ID and the bot alias. Those were the two identifiers I showed you in the Lex console. The region the bot is in is US East 1. I'm going to pre-fill an intent, book hotel. This book trip bot has a few different variations. You can book a hotel, you can book a car, etc., etc. But let's start off with, say that we know we want to book a hotel, so we want to initially pre-fill the intent with book hotel and head down that path. We've got credentials, so I'm looking to get from environment variables an AWS access key and secret access key that will give me the authorization to run this bot. And then an event hook where I'm going to receive events as they come. I'm not going to do anything this time other than just log them out so we can take a look at them. Everything's not quite all set. We need to set up a route for that. Let's just say it's going to be /lex. Now everything's set in my application. Let's just restart it. And we're good to go on that side. Over on the jambonz side, I need to create an application, which actually I've already done. If we look at it here, got an application with the path that I just set up. I'm going to use UK English and a male voice this time, just to make things different. Now, when we start this bot, or when we run this bot, we're using the audio from Lex to start with, so we won't use that voice initially, but we'll see how we can switch to use TTS to override the Lex audio if we want to. And then I just got to route my incoming calls. Oh, it's already done. Okay, so we're good to go. Okay, let us make the test call. All right, let's try it out.
What city will you be staying in?
Boston.
What day do you want to check in?
Tomorrow.
How many nights will you be staying?
4.
What type of room would you like? Queen, king, or deluxe?
Deluxe.
Okay, I have you down for a 4-night stay in Boston starting May 9th, 2021. Shall I book the reservation?
Yes. Okay, so there we go. Pretty straightforward. Let's make a few changes to our app. We'll go back to Lex. Let's use text-to-speech. So instead of using the Lex audio, we can use our own. And again, we'll just take the application defaults, which I set to be Google and English, Great Britain English. So we'll do that. Besides pre-filling an intent, we can also pre-fill slots. So let's say that we already know the location. Say Boston. Maybe we're providing some sort of IVR for, and based on a preferred caller identifier, we know that he travels to Boston every week. So something like that. But this is just to show that we can pre-fill the intent. We can also pre-fill slots. Okay, let's try it again.
What city will you be staying?
Oh, same voice. Why? Because I did not restart the app. Let's do that with my changes. Okay, let's try again.
What day do you want to check in?
Friday.
How many nights will you be staying?
4.
What type of room would you like? Queen, king, or deluxe?
Deluxe.
Okay, I have you down for a 4-night stay in Boston starting the 14th of May 2021. Shall I book the reservation?
Yes. Okay, so there we can see, although he did not prompt for city, because that slot was pre-filled, it was part of the information that was processed. It was confirmed at the end, 3-night stay in Boston. So that's Lex, pretty straightforward. So in this not so short video, and I apologize for the length of it, we have built some applications with the Node.js SDK, showed you how to use the Create Jambonz app to scaffold an app up quickly. We walked through it to see the different parts of it. Then we built an app using the gather command to gather some information and then dial based on it. We built another application that integrates with Dialogflow and a third application that integrates with Lex. All right, you just built your first app. Woohoo! There's more to learn, of course. And don't worry, I got you covered. What I suggest you do next is check out my video covering some of the advanced topics in building applications. In that video, we'll implement attended transfer using Jambonz, and we'll be doing live call control to manipulate different call legs in progress. It's going to be a lot of fun, so check it out. That's all for now, and if you have any questions, please email us at support@jambonz.org, or just hit me up directly at daveh@jambonz.org. All right, I'll see you next time, and you have a great day.